The terms recession, depression, and inflation are all used in economics to describe different aspects of the economy. While they are related to economic performance, they refer to distinct phenomena. Let me break down each term in detail. A recession is a period of economic decline that lasts for at least 2 consecutive quarters, or 6 months or more. During a recession, there is a noticeable decrease in the overall economic activity, which includes a drop in GDP or gross domestic product, rising unemployment, and a slowdown in consumer spending and business investments. Key characteristics of a recession: GDP contraction. A recession is usually defined by 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, increased unemployment. As businesses produce less and reduce their activities, they may lay off workers, leading to a rise in the unemployment rate. Lower consumer spending. People tend to spend less because of uncertainties about the economy, and this further reduces demand for goods and services. Falling business investment. Companies may hold off on expansion, reduce production, or scale back investment projects because of weakened demand. Causes of recession. Recessions can be triggered by various factors, including financial crises, high inflation, sudden increases in interest rates, or external shocks like oil price spikes or natural disasters. They can also be caused by structural imbalances in the economy. Depression. A depression is a much more severe and prolonged form of economic downturn than a recession. While there is no strict definition of when a recession becomes a depression, depressions generally last for several years, involve a much deeper contraction in economic activity, and are accompanied by widespread unemployment and business failures. Key characteristics of a depression: extended economic decline. A depression is usually marked by a severe and prolonged downturn in economic activity. It can last for several years and lead to a massive contraction in GDP. Very high unemployment rates during a depression can reach levels much higher than those seen during a recession. This can last for an extended period. Severe deflation. In contrast to the inflation that might occur in a recession, a depression often causes a significant decline in prices or deflation as demand for goods and services drops drastically. Widespread bankruptcies. Many businesses, especially small and medium-sized ones, may not survive due to the lack of consumer spending and credit. Historical example. The most famous example of a depression is the Great Depression of the 1930s. It started in 1929 and lasted until the late 1930s, causing massive unemployment, bank failures, and a collapse in world trade. Causes of depression. Depressions are often caused by a combination of factors, such as a financial crisis, a collapse in consumer and business confidence, and structural weaknesses in the economy. The Great Depression, for example, was triggered by the 1929 stock market crash, which led to a severe loss of wealth, banking panics, and a massive contraction in global trade. Inflation. Inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises, leading to a decline in the purchasing power of money. In simple terms, inflation means that as prices rise, the value of money decreases, and you can buy less with the same amount of money. Key characteristics of inflation: rising prices. Inflation is characterized by a steady increase in the prices of goods and services, such as food, housing, and fuel. Decline in purchasing power. As inflation increases, the value of money decreases. For example, if inflation is at 5%, a $100 bill will buy what $95 could have bought a year ago. Measured by the CPI. Inflation is typically measured by the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which tracks the average price changes of a basket of goods and services over time. Types of inflation include demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, and built-in inflation, also known as the wage price spiral. Demand pull inflation occurs when the demand for goods and services exceeds their supply, leading to higher prices. Cost push inflation happens when the cost of production for businesses increases, due to higher wages, raw material costs, and other factors. Companies then pass these costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Built-in inflation, or the wage price spiral, occurs when businesses raise prices to compensate for higher labor costs. In response, workers demand higher wages to keep up with increased living costs. Moderate inflation, say 2 to 3% per year, is usually seen as a sign of a growing economy. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve, often aim for a certain level of inflation to encourage spending and investment. Hyperinflation, on the other hand, is an extreme case where inflation spirals out of control, often reaching monthly rates of over 50%. This leads to a complete breakdown of the currency's value and can cause severe economic instability. An example of hyperinflation is seen in Zimbabwe in the late 2000s. Causes of inflation can be quite varied. Inflation can be caused by demand increases, where people want more goods than are available. It can also be driven by increased production costs, for example, rising oil prices. It can also be driven by increased production costs, for example, rising wages. Additionally, monetary policy plays a role. Central banks printing too much money can also cause inflation if there's more money in the system than there are goods and services. Let's talk about key differences. Recession versus depression. A recession is a short-term economic downturn, while a depression is a much longer and more severe economic crisis. Recession or depression versus inflation. Recession and depression are about the economy contracting, meaning shrinking economic activity, while inflation is about the economy expanding, meaning prices rising, often due to higher demand or higher production costs. In summary, recession is a short-term period of economic decline. Depression is a long-term, severe economic downturn. Inflation is a rise in prices across the economy, leading to a decrease in purchasing power. Would you like more detail on any of these?